Hi, I'm Jeff Yarger. I'm a professor of chemistry, biochemistry, and physics at Arizona State University.
I'm Samrat Amin. I'm a staff scientist at the Magnetic Resonance Center at ASU.
So, Samrat, today we're looking at, in the Magnetic Resonance Center, we have several automated NMRs. We affectionately just call them walk-up NMRs, right? Mm-hmm. Right now we have a 400 megahertz walk-up system. It's by Bruker, and a 600 that's used less frequently in walk-up mode. And soon we're about to have a 500 megahertz systems, probably start of 2019. Right. And with these walk-up or fully automated instruments, the norm has become for students to go in and use this completely automated system to take their samples for running NMR. Right. And so what I'd like to cover today is just, most of the work in setting up the sample is really sitting in front of the computer, making sure everything's entered and the computer knows what to run. And then after that, it's just getting the sample into the auto sampler, which we'll cover in a future video. But today I'd like to just cover what it takes for a student sitting at the computer to get their samples submitted for automated NMR. And this would be true for research students, right? Educational students, even remote students who are having their samples sent. Basically, we're having somebody enter this into the automated system, right? And there's really two components to this. One is sitting on the instrument directly, running Bruker's software, which they have IconNMR as a completely separate package for this automated service. And that's what we're going to look at first. And then you've created a package for getting the data so that it doesn't rely on you being at the spectrometer at all, right? It's completely a cloud-based service called Spintropy. So the second half will look a little bit at that. Yeah. Right? So let's start with IconNMR. Okay. It's what's pulled up here behind us, right? And this is this is basically the screen we would see if we were sitting in front of the walk-up instrument, right? Right.
Yeah, this is the screen you should see when you walk up to the Bruker 400 or any automated system. And
so there's really three sections, and it's really just the top section which we have expanded here today that you have to enter something. Right. The second section is kind of showing you with all the stoplights and stuff. It's basically showing you what's running, what's in the queue, et cetera, so you can make sure after you submitted that your stuff is there. And then the bottom window is just what has been run, and if you double click anything there, it pulls up TopSpin, right?
It pulls up your data in TopSpin where you can actually go.
But the data is initially stored locally on the computer they're entering, right?
That's right.
And is it stored there for long periods of time? Is it backed up? Or as soon as you transfer it to the cloud, does it get deleted?
No, it stays on the computer, and we just do that for data redundancy. So
so if absolutely necessary, they could, in a sense, come in with a flash drive and pull off their data later. Right. However, the whole point of this in automated mode is that they don't have to.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's walk through. You come in, you sit at the NMR. Before you do anything, you brought a sample in with you, but before you do anything about putting the sample on the NMR, you really sit in front of the IconNMR here and enter some information.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So really, like you said, you only need three basic pieces of information, and then you link that to your username for data upload. So
you need the name, the solvent, the experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
On the left-hand side, so it can be any name, right?
Yeah. So whatever you're running.
And this is going to be the file name or the directory name that it gives the subset of files.
Yeah.
Right?
And the important thing to keep in mind here is that you can actually run more than one experiment here, right? So and the same name that you enter here will be given to all of those experiments that you run on that one sample. So
it puts subfolders in.
Yeah, when you go to the data handling site, which I'll show you later, they'll actually all be divided out, but they'll have the same name. And there's some information that's displayed there that lets you differentiate them.
Okay, I always have a rule of thumb, because when I think of a name being associated with a file, I always tend to not want to use spaces and use underscores and stuff because of Linux. And it's often not as big of a problem anymore as it used to be, but it's not really required here, is it?
You can put a space here, and handles it fine. There are some characters that it doesn't like, but we've gone through and tested a lot of things.
Is there a length?
Yes, there is actually, and it's fairly long. I want to say it's about 100 characters. So
okay, so you can enter kind of long names in with spaces, but
Yeah.
I would say, I guess by default, I always think of using one continuous thing with underscores instead of
Right.
spaces as being something that is more backwards compatible with a lot of systems,
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
than a lot of things. So, okay, so you have your test underscore sample, but it could be, like you said, any name you want under 100
Right.
characters. Then you move on. So in NMR, it's a requirement that you run whatever sample for liquid state NMR dissolved in a deuterated solvent. And so you have quite a large choice here. And basically your sample has to be in one of these deuterated solvents. You would say the most common is probably deuterated chloroform. But you would say most are represented, right? Like acetonitrile, methanols, ethanol. Yeah, I mean, so most alcohols, some hydrocarbons, et cetera. But common deuterated NMR solvents are all pretty much
they're all in here
listed. So you find which one yours is, and it even has the option of no solvent. But I mean, I would say you really should only run this if you're running it in one of these deuterated solvents, right?
Right.
Then the only other, you would say, hard requirement is the experiment you want to run, right?
This is the important one, yeah. So this experiment tab here, or dropdown, is basically a list of all the experiments that we've set up in the Magnetic Resonance Center. And what we've done here is basically give you an easy list to come in and drop in a sample and say, I want one experiment done, or I want a whole list of experiments done on this one sample. So if you're doing real structural analysis or something like that, you can actually come in here and run our magnetic resonance structure, which ends up running proton, carbon, COSY, HSQC, and HMBC, all of those on that one particular sample. So this is what we call a composite experiment at this point. But let's say
will run, so your MMRC underscore structure runs a 1D proton, right, with a certain number of scans, I assume. A 1D carbon 13, a correlation spectroscopy, or COSY, and heteronuclear single quantum coherence. So that's a 2D proton carbon, and then a 2D heteronuclear multiple bond correlation, or another heteronuclear proton carbon.
Yeah.
So it gets both of the one-dimensional ones, and then it runs a homonuclear and two heteronuclear 2D experiments. And so it'll all have the test underscore sample name.
Yeah, exactly.
All 4 experiments, though, will be separated in the cloud.
Yeah, and as you'll see on Spintropy, it actually gives you little bits of information that lets you know this is an HSQC or this is a 1D proton experiment. So it's not that you won't be able to differentiate them later, but this just makes it easier because you don't have to specifically put in different file names for every single experiment, right?
Okay.
So,
and you can see the top experiment is the one that people run most, right? Just a simple proton.
Yeah.
And then,
simple proton, and then
if you want to run a long proton, it even gives you one.
Yeah, I want to say the simple one runs about 16 or 32 scans.
Okay.
If you need better sensitivity, you can run the long one with 512.
But these are really meant for what you would say is the very kind of standard spectral width, standard number of scans run in a proton. But it really does give you quite a range of, like you said, either single experiments or multiple ones. Now, it also says, some like overnight. And so this is Bruker sophisticated enough that the queue itself, if you're not running one of just the simple, quick experiments that only takes a few minutes, if you're running something that's going to take multiple hours, it doesn't run that. Even if you queue it up during the middle of the day, it won't run it until that night, right?
Yeah, the instrument actually has a day queue and a night queue, right? So like you said, if you're running like a 6-hour carbon, it's smart enough to automatically push that into the night queue, so you're not backing up the instrument for routine proton experiments during the day for 6+ hours.
Right. And that's what the middle and the bottom, but specifically the middle set window can show you how many is in the queue in front of you,
exactly.
and stuff like that, so that you could gauge how much longer till your stuff stuff is done.
Right. It actually gives you a little time down here to let you know that this amount of time is blocked off for the night queue and the day queue. So when you come in here, submit a sample, you know exactly how long you're going to wait for that to run.
Okay, so what's the next? So those are the 3 required.
Right.
So then the next one down is just pick one. So we're going to run a proton spinning. So the mol file would be if you had a molecular structure.
Right.
And you would say this is commonly not entered, but it can be, right? If you have a molecular structure of something you're going to do, you can enter that in. And if you were going to do something in a quantitative way where you have a reference spectrum, you have that option as well. But you would say those bottom 2 are kind of advanced features not commonly used.
Right.
Those top 3 have to be entered for this to run.
Yep.
And then on the right side, you would say, even though these are optional, you would say not really, right? Because really the Spintropy username, you need to be registered with Spintropy. And if it has a username, you need to put it here because this is really about you getting your data, right? If this isn't entered correctly or left blank, then your data is, while it's still on the instrument itself, the walk-up instrument, it's not going to be uploaded to the cloud where you're going to have access.
That's right.
So, and then finally, the window that basically has no name is really what I think of as the comment window, right?
Yeah.
And while it's optional, what I would, I guess, say is it's very good practice to populate this with, I would say, as much information about your sample, reference to a lab notebook where information is about this. You know, you really can't enter too much information here as far as making it where if you want to look at the spectra at a much later date, that you have information to help guide you to what it is, what the sample was, et cetera.
Yeah.
So once you've done all this, really all you have to do is queue that experiment, right?
Yep.
And so if you hit that, now's where you need to be in the magnetic resonance center, not just in front of the display, right? Because now it's telling you the sample position to put it into the auto sampler on the magnet. So it's telling us to put it in position number 25. And so we're going to need to have our NMR tube. We're going to need to put it in a turbine so that it can be spun, right?
Yep.
And then putting it into slot 25. And we'll have a separate video in the magnetic resonance center that walks through, you know, actually, you know, the hands-on putting something in there.
Right.
So let's just assume, you know, we put the sample in, it's run, you know, et cetera. I think it is worth covering. So we would just hit add that, and as soon as it's added, within a certain amount of time, if it's just a short proton and there's nothing queued in front of it, literally it could be 10 minutes after we submitted it. If you run a complete structural thing, it might even run the proton within the first 10 or 20 minutes and then overnight queue a lot of the 2Ds. But you will start populating in Spintropy your data. So right now you have a program that on the local computers uploads that to a cloud service, right?
Right.
And this cloud service is Spintropy. Can you tell us a little something about this?
So this is a website that was developed basically to handle NMR data and specifically automation NMR data, right? So coupled with the IconNMR interface, this really handles all the data that's coming out of that instrument. And it's what really allows you to come into the facility, drop in a sample or a few samples, and then just leave. And you don't even have to come back to really see your data or pick up samples. But all the data then eventually goes online, and there's an ability to view the data here. You can download it, process it in whatever your favorite processing software is.
So what we're looking at here is the front page for spintropy.com, right? So this is a website where, now what about they don't have a username and password, or they haven't already, so then they instead click the register button?
Yeah, so if you're at the Magnetic Resonance Center and you're a user, you'd come in here, hit the register button, and
you create a user account.
Create a user account. So yeah, put in your name, email address, choose a username, and the website will send you a verification link. You click that, and then there's a a couple other extra items that you need to do in your account to get set up with the Magnetic Resonance Center, but we have a guide that you can follow to do that, and it's a one-time setup thing.
Okay, so then let's assume that somebody is already registered, and so and then what, in a sense, they know from that is they know their username, right?
Right.
So so they'll know their username and password because they set them up. So this is something, and I assume if they lost it, I forgot, I see is right there. Like
Yeah, right
if they
there.
forgot it, I assume it sends them an email and resets it and things like that.
Yeah, as long as you remember your username or your email, you can recover.
Well, and as
your
we've
account.
seen, like in a sense, the part we just showed on IconNMR assumes you already have a Spintropy account. You would say that's the first step even before submitting your first sample, because you need that Spintropy username so that the data gets routed correctly onto the cloud. So they've already registered here. They've already gone down to the Magnetic Resonance Center. Now they have a username and password. So from anywhere, I assume this website is accessible anywhere in the world, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So they can enter their username and password, and as soon as they do, this is the dashboard doesn't have any, but they can click on the data icon and see whatever data has been uploaded.
Right.
They can also share that data to another user, so they would need to know the other user's Spintropy username?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to share data. You can actually share individual data sets. So if you click here on any data set, you can go to share and
so you need their email address that they use to set up.
Right.
Okay.
Or if you want to share all your data with, let's say, your PI or another group member, you can actually go into the sharing tab here and just enter their Spintropy username, and it will share all the data you collect with that on that instrument with that particular user or set of users.
And then the facilities shows that we're in the Magnetic Resonance Center at ASU, and then I assume my account allows you to change a password or email. Make sure you know your email. Okay. So let's go to the one that you would say, like, which is data, right? Mm-hmm. And so this allows you to, if it's 1D data, both view the data as well as download it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So both of these are 1D experiments. One's a proton, one's a carbon, and you can tell Spintropy actually differentiates that with these little buttons down here. So it shows you what type of experiment was run or what nucleus was run, what type of experiment here, which the ZG30 is a common experiment on that Bruker.
0 go, 30-degree tip angle?
30 degree. And this is the carbon version of that. And then it also gives you some file parameters, when exactly this was uploaded in Eastern time, what the size of that file is.
Well, that's useful. Like you said, you know how big it is. And so if you click the little, looks like spectra, that takes you to a plot?
Yeah. So on 1D experiments, you can click that button, come in here, and quickly just view your data. So this is useful for if you're doing some routine stuff and you just want to make sure I ran the right stuff or I made the right stuff without actually downloading it, importing it into MNOVA or Topspin or any of the other programs. This just lets you just click a button, see your spectrum, and it has some basic functionality, like you can zoom in and look at peak positions and just get general idea of what your spectrum looks like. It doesn't really allow you to do integrations and things like that.
Or re-reference things or anything like that. So it's assumed that it's referenced correctly from the thing you ran, from the program you ran. And like you said, it's really meant just as a quick overview. It's not meant to, like you said, do all the data analysis and processing, but just a quick view. But it does let you look at some of the experimental parameters, it looks like.
Right, yeah, so if you click this button, it kind of runs through the basic parameters. So, what kind of pulse sequence or type of experiment you're running, what spectrometer frequency is, the sweep width, solvent you selected, and it gives you just some general parameters for the data collection.
Okay. And where is the name of the file that was used?
Right here.
So
this is
at the very
name-
top that's the name that was given in IconNMR.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, okay.
And you have the ability to actually rename that once it goes to Spintropy. So, and then you can actually do it on every single data set, right? So once it's uploaded to this website, you have some flexibility on how to name it.
Okay.
The other thing you'll notice is whatever we put in that comment box will actually show up here as well.
Oh, so your comments show up as well.
Yeah, so that's another reason to put in whatever information you want. And
So what's the second button? Looks like a download?
Yeah, so this just downloads a file to your desktop. And so if you open this file, let's see if we can.
Well, that's okay. Let's. I don't think, but it downloads it as a zip file.
Yeah, so it'll be a zip file, and it's in Bruker format. So.
So it's really meant to be opened in TopSpin. You would
Yeah,
say.
actually, yeah. You can open it in MNOVA, TopSpin, anything that natively reads in Bruker.
But I mean, TopSpin, which is Bruker's native software, and if you were to double click on IconNMR, that's what it would pull up to as well,
Exactly.
is freely available for students. Now they have to register, download it, but it works on both Windows machines and Linux machines, right?
Yeah, Mac also.
And Mac also.
Yeah.
So basically, students who want can always download a freely available Bruker TopSpin software to be able to analyze this data.
Exactly.
Okay. Is it by default you don't save it in any ASCII format of any sort?
Actually, I think in that folder that you download, there's an ASCII version in there as well. So it's bundled along with the zipped folder.
So then you could just, in a sense, try to read it in a standard MATLAB or Sigma plot or Origin or a number of even spreadsheet type programs that can handle large data sets.
Excel even, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the final thing is multiple other options, or what's okay?
This little tab, so this is like a little settings tab here. This allows you to go through and, like I said, your experimental details that you enter in Icon when you submit this show up here. But now you have the ability to go in here and actually edit some of this out and update whatever you want here.
Okay.
You can change the file name here if you want, and like I showed you earlier, you can share your data.
Oh, nice. So really, you have a kind of a full gamut of things you can do, and you can just, if you had run 100 experiments, I assume it would just start populating down.
Yeah, and it actually separates them out by date. I don't have a lot of data in this account here, but if you run things routinely or daily, they will be separated out daily. And one of the nice features is that the site basically just keeps all your data until a facility administrator wants to delete it, if they're running up to a cap on the data.
But also, I mean, as soon as it gets run, it's uploaded to this cloud site, and you're able to immediately download it and have it on any local computer you want.
Within minutes, yeah, typically.
Okay.
So, and then if your list of experiment gets really long, you actually have the ability to search for data here as well. So, if I just type in something here and search for it, you can tell,
It'll
it caught
find
this here. So
even ones that, because I assume it only shows to a certain point, it doesn't scroll back
exactly.
months
I think
and
it
months.
shows about 100 of your last data sets. And if you run through here, there's some filtering options as well. So if you wanted to look for data in a certain year or a month or on a specific date, you can just go in here, lock it down, and pull up data that way as well.
Okay. Well, I think that covers the basics of both from the computer standpoint on IconNMR, entering the data necessary, to be able to submit a sample. And then once that sample has been submitted, being able to get onto Spintropy and access that data, either download it or if it's a 1D, be able to look at a quick plot of it. So thank you.
Sure.